more to the boardroom. This is the Business of Esports. The worlds of gaming and esports are evolving every day faster than ever before. With yougov's living data, you can probe into the real thoughts and behaviors of esports fans and gamers worldwide. If you're a team, a brand, an agency, or a rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. They're partners with the biggest names in esports and the biggest brands all around the world, driving compelling results every single day. Check out yougov.com/BOE and schedule a call with YouGov today.
From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports weekly news show / post podcast live stream. Can't speak. I am Paul the Prophet Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friends and co-hosts, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Baratta, Lindsay the Boss, Jeff the Juice Cohen. For those of you who are new here, welcome to the official podcast / weekly news show of esports. What we do is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. And best of all, with this live stream, we get to do it live with you guys. You get to ask us questions, get in our faces, challenge us. It makes it so much more fun. We encourage it. It's a safe space. We know so many of you lurk. That's okay too. But hopefully you're taking time, whether it's out of your work day or your morning or whenever you're, whatever time zone you're in. We really appreciate when people come and participate. It makes it so much more fun for everybody. Lindsay, everybody, how you guys doing this week?
It's been a crazy, crazy week. I am looking forward to the weekend for sure.
That doesn't sound like good crazy.
Just been so just really busy all of a sudden. It just sort of exploded on me. So lots of stuff to do. It's good though.
We were, Jimmy and I were talking about it on the podcast. Usually the summer is like slow down time, and it feels like nothing has slowed down at all. At all. And maybe that's more a statement about the gaming industry as a whole, or I don't know if there's any conclusion to draw from that. But literally everyone I've talked to, including present company here, everyone's just saying this is the most busy they've been the whole year.
That is true. Busy. This is the first live stream I'm doing from the new house too. I moved to a house, so I'm still getting my background all set up. I'll have to put some cool pictures of bulldogs and stuff up.
No, gamer stuff, like a nice framed portrait of Ninja or something.
I'll consider that.
What about a lacrosse jersey and an All-American record?
I was thinking about that too. We'll see.
Bobby says, "I've made it." Bobby, I mean, this is the top. Life just doesn't get any better than this. You have made it. Welcome. Matt says, "Most important part of the week." I agree. Prajent says, "How's everyone's week?" Prajent, I think everyone's just super busy, but I'll speak for everyone and say I think we're all doing good. John Paul Howard Kaplan says, "Hello from Chile." John Paul, hello. Welcome. Great to see new names, new geographies in here. Matt says, "A framed portrait of Paul's face." Yeah, somehow, I don't know if that would fly in Jeff's house, but it's a thought, Matt. It's a thought. I think more people should have that. I agree. Guys, before we jump into some news, I want to tease the podcast this week. We had Emil, I'm going to mispronounce his name, Emil Vanyaka, but it's spelled with a J, not a Y, Vanyaka, Emil Vanyaka he's the co-founder of Able Esports, and he's also on the board of the Quebec Esports Federation. And so they've got this really cool local approach so far to esports in terms of what they're doing in Quebec. I think the other interesting part is he's a reformed lawyer with a full 9 to 5 day job And so he built like this esports org on the side, which, we talked about. And I think there was some interesting insight there in terms of how to do that and how to manage all those things at the same time. Because I think a lot of people aspire to do that, right? Like build something on the side while they're working their 9 to 5. So highly recommend everyone tune into that episode. It was a lot of fun, great insights, great guests. So that should drop on Friday. Emil Vinyaka from Able Esports. Guys, we have to, maybe no surprise what story we have to start with this week, even though I think it's probably like maybe the least interesting story. I just think like my hands are tied. I have to start with this. And that is FaZe Clan in the news. I think everyone has been following this and talking about this. FaZe Clan finally public. So after all the starts and stops and the news that leaked and the letter and like all these things that we covered, FaZe Clan is now public. And the headline here from CNBC: FaZe Clan goes public in $725 million SPAC, a market bet on Gen Z and the creator economy. So it says the key points in this article: FaZe Clan's an online media company. I always like how other media outlets describe FaZe Clan. So now it's an online media company made up of 93 members, consisting primarily of esports competitors and content creators, plus a handful of celebrities like Snoop Dogg, who also serve on the company's board. FaZe Clan started in 2010, with gamers posting videos on YouTube, ranked the 4th most valuable esports company by Forbes. And they mentioned the starts and stops with this SPAC. Now, I don't know what the shares. The cool part about doing the podcast at this time, we have sort of the stock's trading in real time at the moment. I don't know if one of you can check.
Actually
sort of
down. So it's down like 27%. It had been down 30% a little while ago. I actually bought some $10 puts a couple weeks ago, so it's doing pretty well currently. They don't expire until August. But congrats to them for getting public. I know there were some fits and starts. We definitely, at times, it looked potentially bleak. The interesting thing to see will be how much redemptions they got. So there's a bit of a confusing mechanic with SPACs where there's a vote, and people who bought the SPAC prior to the vote can actually redeem their shares for $10, or they can get the stock of the company. And so often what happens, this actually happened with Allied Esports back, 2 years ago when they did the SPAC. They had thought that they were going to it's called de-SPAC. They thought they were going to have $300 million on their balance sheet, which was then going to enable them to go and build a whole bunch of arenas and kind of go through their whole business plan. And I think they ended up with like $40 or $50 million of cash because they got all these redemptions. So one thing that I noted that was actually announced, I think 2 or 3 days ago, was that a lot of times these SPACs will have a minimum redemption amount. So basically they'll say like the de-SPAC won't happen if there's too many redemptions, and companies will want that option because you don't want to go public and then immediately have no money because all the people who you thought were investing redeemed. You'd immediately have to raise more money and it would lead to more dilution. They actually waived that. So there was no minimum requirement for cash after the SPAC. So I'm going to be interested to see when they file to see how much cash they have on the balance sheet. They're probably, long story short, I think they're going to probably have to raise money because they're burning cash. And I'm guessing based on the fact that they waived that requirement, they probably had a lot of redemptions. So I'm betting that this one keeps going down, but congratulations to them for going public. Obviously, it's a massive accomplishment and a really important moment for the esports space.
Jeff, I just want to ask you a question to make sure I understand and our viewers/listeners understand. Does that imply that if the stock sits below $10 right now and call it for the next few days or weeks, does that increase the chance of greater redemptions? Is there some cutoff point?
I think so. That redemption period already happened. Yeah. So basically you would have redeemed. That's why until there's the vote, usually these things are pretty stuck to $10. You can see them go up above. That means there just won't be redemptions. But there's funds that do like, I guess it's some sort of arbitrage. I forget the name, but it's arbitrage. So like you'll never really see these things trade before they actually close the deal too much below $10, because you always have the ability to buy it and then basically say, hey, I don't want shares in FaZe, I want my $10. So if you bought it for $8, you get 10, you immediately get that $2. So rarely do they trade. If you look at the stock chart and pull it up, it was basically at $10 for like the last 5 or 6 months, or 7 months even. So I think that period ended whenever the vote was, like 2 days ago. So now it's just completely free floating.
And what is the current market cap as of right now?
It's a good question. I'm actually not sure. Let's see.
Because if it was 725 and they're down about a third, right? 25%, 27%, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
It's hovering. I think we had mentioned that 500 million mark would probably be where this shakes out at the end of the day. Whoever bought, I guess, was it priced right in your mind at the end of the day?
I don't think so, but I guess it depends in whose perspective. I mean, I don't know the mechanics of the SPAC well enough to understand like the fact that it's going down, who's losing value. Like, is that mean that the people who own FaZe previously are losing value, or is it the people that invested in the SPAC then are losing more value? Well, obviously, it's not good for either, but. Yeah.
I want to, Matt. I'm going to get to your questions, but I want to put Prajant's question on up here, which is, so them going down at launch is expected then, correct? I mean, is that the implication of that $10 redemption?
I mean, I don't think
it'll converge to that.
I think you've seen, it depends. It's a little bit of a sign of where we are in the market, but then also like, I think it's a sign that they maybe priced the deal too high. And obviously it's the first day. So, I think in 2 weeks or a month, we'll have a little better sense of like, okay, are there actually buyers? Like, where does the market shake out? Personally, I think it'll be lower, but that, obviously that's not investment advice. But that's what it's really a reflection on, but it doesn't necessarily mean, it's not like they, quote unquote, expected it to go down, because you see SPACs historically go up, right? Like DraftKings was a SPAC. I think it went from $10 to, as high as like 70. It's obviously back down. I think it's at 15 now, but like, it's not like a given that it's going to go down. I think it just means they didn't price it right.
Yeah. So let me Matt asked me, are you going to invest, Paul? Let me come back to that, Matt. And let's ask the second question here. Is anyone else going to invest? If so, how many shares will you buy? Before I answer this, or anyone else answers this, just to be clear, none of this is investment advice. You should do your own due diligence. You should make your own, decisions. None of this is financial advice. But Jimmy, Lindsay, for you guys, what's your take on this? And is this a stock you would buy personally? Is it something you're excited about? We've talked at length about FaZe and some of the potential skeletons in the closet. Now that they made it public, would you recommend this to a friend? Would you tell your grandmother that this is a bet on the future?
Lindsay, since you're pausing and still muted, I'm going to jump in. 2 very different questions with very different answers for me here, right? First off, FaZe going public, and would I tell my friends about this? Absolutely, I'm going to share it, because it's not every day that we have an esports org or a company in our industry that goes public. And at the end of the day, as much as you might disagree with one move that they make or one announcement or the other, you still had a company that was able to announce $1 billion SPAC listing that had some trouble, but still managed to get it across the table and to get it listed. And while they're having a rough first day, again, they did it at a very high valuation, and whether it's 725 or 500, those are still great numbers to associate their brand with. I agree with Jeff. I think it's closer to 500, maybe even closer to 4, honestly. But at the end of the day, it's something I would share with friends of mine that I know are interested in investing or working in the space, because it's a success story nonetheless. And big I got to do a shameless plug here and big kudos, shout out to Will Eddins, to Clinton Sparks, to Greg Selko, and the guys on the XSET team that were a big part of this FaZe driving force for years, and obviously left to do it a little different with what we're doing at XSET. But I know they're proud of this, and that's a cool thing I think in the industry, is that you can root for your competitors and root for that rising tide to raise all ships. The second question on whether or not I would invest personally, I'd probably say no, but that's just my general, again, to mimic Paul's, disclaimer about not investment advice. I just am not really hot on the market right now in general, and I'm probably going to wait another 6 months or so before I reevaluate where things are. And well, also buying a house, so there's a lot of personal things on why I wouldn't buy FaZe Clan. But I just don't think that, I still don't think it's worth 500. I think it's probably worth closer to 4. I'm also a little hesitant because this is the FaZe brand has a lot of skeletons in the closet. They have a lot of negative things in their past that have come to light. And when you're tied so closely to these creators and people that are continuing to make bad decisions, I don't know how that would affect the company or the stock. So I'm probably going to wait to see if this stabilizes, if they implement any changes now that they're a public facing company. If you're willing to take that risk, though, $10 is not a bad bet, though. So that's probably where I'll leave it to you, Lindsay.
Lindsay, I'm curious to get your take, but I would love for you to add, if you can, your thoughts on how CNBC described FaZe. Like, for those who don't know, Lindsay had a very successful career in communications before she did anything in gaming and esports. So I'm curious, like the way they phrased it in that first sentence, what you think of that.
Yeah, can you pull that back up? Yeah, because I only vaguely remember it.
An online media company made up of 93 members, consisting primarily of esports competitors and content creators. I thought was interesting.
Well, and even the headline stands out as the creator economy and Gen Z. And I definitely think that they're going for a certain angle here and telling a certain story that's much more attractive to potential investors. I don't know that we've worked out a very good market model for what we can call the creator economy, because it still doesn't make the money that I think people think it should make based on the users that follow the creator economy. So I think this is a very, very optimistic way of putting what FaZe Clan does. I remember when we previously talked about it, we thought that they would maybe drop in multiples a little bit more than the 725. We talked about how they had 100 million in revenue. So 3 to 4 times multiple would be 300 to 400 million, maybe 500, just because this is a more forward-thinking company, quote unquote. But the 725 price tag does surprise me a bit. That said, I'm still kind of with Jimmy that if you have a small amount of money that you're willing to put into a risky kind of situation, this could be one that pays off quite greatly. I don't know that I would go around touting that or advertising that to people, but I can see that there hasn't been a model for this, again, quote unquote, creator economy Gen Z thing. It could be FaZe. I'm not saying it couldn't. I don't necessarily feel like it's FaZe, but that's just based on my own impressions of FaZe and how I interact with them, not necessarily based on how the market might react to them. So definitely with Jimmy in that, no personal investment for me at this time for sure. Not that I have the funds to do that anyway. And when it comes to maybe talking to other friends who are kind of interested in this space, I would say, hey, like, put in an amount that you're willing to lose just to see what happens, but don't bet your retirement on this one.
Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say the fact that the way they're describing themselves really says a lot about the way that they think investors think about esports right now.
Yeah.
Right. Because like, I guarantee you, if this SPAC had happened 2 years ago or even 18 months ago, they would have said an esports company, FaZe Clan, or like a gaming company, FaZe Clan. Now it's a bet on Gen Z and creator economy. I mean, that could literally be a social media company. That could be, a scooter company. Like, it really is not even that descriptive. And then they call themselves an online digital media company. Like, it's very broad. And I think that's obviously super intentional by them. And I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on what that means for the esports space. I mean, we've obviously had a number of esports companies in the last, call it 3 years, that have been public, that have had not great results. present company included, my former company, of course. So I do think there is some aspect of like public market investors have soured a little bit on the esports theme, which I think is pretty poignant in just the way that this is being outlined.
Yeah, I guess I was with you up until that last point. I'm not convinced that public market investors have soured. I just think it's a bigger hill to climb to convince people, because I think it's always been a big hill to climb, that esports is a legitimate thing, that even gaming's a legitimate thing, right? You're talking about a room of people when we're talking about real, like traditional public market kind of investors. And I don't mean mom and pop like retail. I mean like big institutional. It's a big hill to climb to convince them of anything new, right? Anything even remotely new. And so, I was with you up until that last point, Jeff, where I think this is not so much about souring on esports. This is more about smart twisting of words to make it more palatable to the big institutions. And online media company is just so much easier to understand. Now, I kind of love that twisting of words, because guess what, we are also an online media company, right? So this is great in terms of just bringing awareness to these kinds of opportunities. But I could replace FaZe Clan here with Business of Esports or Holodeck, and then everything would still be true, right? Like basically, other than the numbers. And so like I think this is very positive. Now, let me answer Matt's question. Would I buy the stock? Personally, I wouldn't, and because I'd rather invest in my own online media company. But I see how some people could and would put this in their portfolio as sort of a bet on Gen Z, because that's the reality. That is FaZe's audience, right? FaZe is going after that Gen Z gamer more aggressively than maybe any other organization on the planet, right? Jimmy mentioned XSET. By the way, congrats to XSET, because they were also in the news this week on their $15 million raise. But like even other cool esports orgs, I think, aren't as laser focused as FaZe on that like real, Gen Z YouTuber or YouTube aficionado kind of audience. So, I'm personally wouldn't invest, but I could see how people would put this in their portfolio. I always worry with FaZe about the skeletons in the closet, right? That to me is always the big question mark, and that's not priced into the deal. Whether we, it's just not priced in. I don't think anyone can price that in, because no one really knows. Adam here says, they're like $1 higher than Under Armour right now as far as hoodie companies go. I don't think those are the comps that FaZe used, but it is a good point, Adam. Chris says, I've been refreshing my CNBC page for 3 hours now and nearly forgot to visit the Business of Esports. Happy FaZe Day. Chris, I'm glad you remembered. It wouldn't be a live show without you. We need you in here because I'm curious to get your thoughts. And I would love to know who in our chat has either bought the stock or plans on buying it, or maybe you shorted the stock. Like, I'm curious what everyone has done with FaZe. People who are listening or watching this, I'd love to know. I'm curious, just even if it's a small sample size, maybe we can extrapolate. Like, how many of you bought the stock or shorted the stock, or did something with this stock in some way today? All right, guys. Let me while we're waiting for that, I want to do two other stories here that are very much in the same vein, because I want to put these sort of three stories together. There were three stories this week, including FaZe, that are really esports org focused. And this next one is 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves was also in the news, but very different kind of story. And this one was 100 Thieves lay off more than a dozen staff on social media and their content teams. Now, before I get into the what some of the article talked about, it's incredible that in the same week, right, FaZe going public describing themselves as an online media company employing mostly content creators. In the same week, 100 Thieves lays off content creators. And so, it says they laid off multiple long-standing employees across their social media and content teams. It's a major shakeup. More than a dozen people, including senior people. I won't name names. It's very, obviously it's unfortunate for them. The layoffs are never fun. Always always want to make sure that that's clear. We don't think this is good news, obviously. And we hope these people land on their feet. But I would love for you guys to get your thoughts on this contrast, right? Where you have FaZe really pushing the language in this direction, and then 100 Thieves seemingly backing off from it. I'm curious what you guys make of it. Jimmy?
This is a sad story, obviously. I love the 100 Thieves brand. I've always thought that they had an interesting approach on the merchandising side of things. We criticize hoodie orgs a lot here, and I thought at the very least that a lot of what they did with merch, with exclusive drops, with seasonal drops, with the luxury collabs, it definitely spoke to my interests. Doesn't hurt that I'm a huge Drake fan and he's one of their Series A investors with Scooter Braun, but it kind of casts a shadow on the otherwise great news with the FaZe SPAC and with the exit Series A. And you got to wonder, after they had just raised such a significant Series C round not more than 2-3 months ago, what are they doing that they need to, I think, take a step back or refocus or change what that approach is? So I'm not sure, honestly, what the thinking is going on there. Maybe they're just trying to get a little leaner because they realize that they can't just keep raising and keep spending, that they're going to have to, have to fix that model, and they're doing it now. But obviously it's not without cost and a kind of a sad story for even some really tenured employees that they've had over there. I noticed, this isn't just the 2.5% across the top that we covered last week with Niantic and Unity and Corsair and a few others. This seems more strategic, right? That they're looking at their business model, they're looking at what works, what doesn't, looking at what they need to do to get to their own SPAC, public listing, or exit of some sort, and saying, they're difficult things to do, and I would defer to you and Jeff in particular on the strategy behind that. But this doesn't seem like they're having difficulties with the market or difficulties with just the current state of things. This seems really intentional. So I'm curious, Jeff, if you want to take over.
I think it's a good. The last piece is interesting on the intentional. I was going to kind of just relate it to the broader market. I mean, it seems a bit of like a sign of the times. A lot of these businesses, not even just in esports, I mean, we've seen it across a lot of tech and startups, raised a good amount of money, call it 6 months, 8 months ago, and had business plans that were very ambitious and included them burning a lot of capital and getting to their next round probably a year later. And now you're halfway through that business plan and your investors are saying, hey, well, look, the interest isn't necessarily there for your next round, or the valuations are going to be lower. You need to cut your burn rate. So, we've seen even like very strong companies, like I would describe, the ones you mentioned, Niantic, Unity, like these are much, much stronger, better positioned companies, than 100 Thieves, having to do big layoffs. So I think it is a little bit just emblematic of where we are, in the economic cycle, and maybe just the investing cycle. But I'll let the other, Lindsay, maybe if you want to chime in on Paul's specific question around like the content creators with the dichotomy versus FaZe. I don't necessarily know if I have great insights into that specific piece.
Yeah. Also, is Paul frozen for anyone else?
No.
Oh, okay, there we go.
He's just deep. I was just giving
no. He was
great
frozen for a
analysis.
second on my end.
He was just very focused.
There was also some deep thought happening there. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's multiple stories to tell about what's going on here, especially as it relates to FaZe. One of the stories is obviously like, 100 Thieves isn't doing as well. I think it's really easy to look and make that conclusion, and they had to lay off people. I think that I think it speaks more to what Jimmy was saying. It's a difference in mentality. I think that FaZe is definitely a Silicon Valley grow at all costs more kind of energy type of company. Whereas I definitely read this as 100 Thieves looking at its revenue model and actually figuring out where to trim to become more profitable. Even though that's obviously a super unfortunate consequence for the people who lost their jobs. But the reality is not every company makes enough money to keep everyone hired. So it does happen. When it comes to the content creation versus, I guess more traditional competition and esports side, I feel like I say this every week, but the model isn't there yet for anyone. So I don't necessarily, whatever FaZe is selling, I'm not sure if I'm buying it, but I could say the same thing for 100 Thieves, even if I feel like they're making moves that put them in a leaner, more profit-driven direction. I guess, I don't know. I'm wondering if they even want to go public or if they're just concerned with making sure that their revenue projections are hit this year, and thus the reason for the layoffs. I think it's a mistake to put these two next to each other because I think it shows like totally different strategies. So comparing them or saying that one is better than the other, I think it's just a little bit too early for that. I do think it's interesting that they're both kind of based more on content creation. Although, like I said, I feel like FaZe is more lifestyle content. 100 Thieves is more gaming content. They both do some of the other, of course. I think it's interesting that they're both based on that though, and they're kind of taking different overall like company strategy. So I guess we'll see what works
Lindsay,
out.
is this, sorry, Paul, if I could ask a question, is this a shift that you're seeing now, or would you have always described 100 Thieves in that manner? Because I personally at least never viewed 100 Thieves as like this pragmatic, like fiscal company that was like, accounting.
Yeah.
It's like, they're building a video game division. They announced that like 3 months ago.
The
like,
cash
hey, we're going to just
compound,
build a video game. Like, how cool would that be if we just decided to build a video game? They built like a multi-million-dollar compound. It's like, I wouldn't have
that's definitely a now
as,
thing.
Like,
I see it more as like a sign of the times, a sign of the general downturn. That kind of thing. I don't think that this has been their long-term strategy. I'm talking about like this week, these stories, that's what it looks like. And taking into account the broader economic direction that we're all going in. Like that's very much this is what's happening right now thing.
But you guys are kind of proving my point that I've made for a long time now, is that 100 Thieves management is sort of out of their depth, right? Like the business has grown beyond their capabilities, and now and the one signal I always point to when I see that is like when you're just reacting, right? When there's no like clear vision, plan, methodical, right? Like when you just react, the economy's down, fire, right? Like and the second point I wanted to make was, does anyone really think 100 Thieves ever did very good at content creation? Like FaZe, you could make that point, right? They were very big on YouTube before, anyone was really talking about FaZe even, right? Like in the mainstream. 100 Thieves, like, other than their Cash App compound facility tour, which by the way is like the only video, that and the Courage like joining 100 Thieves announcement video. Those are the only 2 videos mentioned in this article. Like if your greatest content pieces are your facility tour and someone joining the org, are you really a content business, right? Like, is content really your expertise? Maybe it's a bit of self-awareness that they're just not that good at content, is what it could be, right? Let me get caught up on some of these comments. JM says, I'm personally holding out on FaZe. That's interesting, JM. So not buying the stock. You would think people who watch our podcast would be the prime candidates to be buying FaZe's stock. But Matt says, should this be a reason to worry about the industry? 100 Thieves has always seemed like a leader. If they're struggling, you have to imagine others are struggling too. I want to point that Matt's great question. I want to point you to this article. I mentioned it on the podcast. Alex Lee wrote it, our good friend at Digiday. I'm quoted in the article. I highly recommend everyone go check it out. How recession-proof is the esports industry? It's about a week old now, but a great piece that Alex put together at Digiday. Jam says, personally, I don't see this as a sign of 100 Thieves struggling. I think they maybe overgrew and are having to trim things back to find balance. Yeah, I think it probably went like this, right? They had an investor call or something, some kind of update call. The investors are going, hey guys, we're a little worried about the economy. Like, maybe the next check won't come so fast and furious, and so it's like react. But I don't know. Would have loved to have been the fly on the wall in that room. Project says, I think you could also look at it as maybe 100 Thieves are pulling out of a certain content-based game because it's not as profitable. I don't see them struggling now or in the future. I mean, I don't know if I agree. Content can be very profitable. It's just, I don't know if 100 Thieves is that good at it. JM says, I second that, which I think, JM, you were referring to Project's comment here, but also maybe the fact that 100 Thieves is not that good at content. I don't know. Do you guys think that this is a more surgical, right? The fact that they only cut in social media and content, it's there's some realization that this is not their focus.
Maybe. I mean, I think I agree with the last piece. I don't see that this is like the end of 100 Thieves. I mean, they're still very tip-top org. Like, so, yeah. We're not trying to call that they're worth nothing or that they're gonna disappear. It's just the sign of the times, I think, more than anything else. I don't know, to answer your last question more specifically, I don't know whether this is hey, we're just recognizing we're not that good at content, so we're pulling back a little bit on it. I hope that's not the case, because that would be much more bearish than what I just said. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm going to mispronounce this. Heflamoke says, sorry if I totally mispronounced that. If every esports team has to transform into agencies, content factories, etc., maybe the market is also simply saturated. Everybody does it. I think that's a good point, right? Like, there for a long time was a very clear lack of differentiation, right? Like, was TSM really that different than 100 Thieves, or really that different from, esports org XYZ? I think there has been a struggle for a long time to just be different or find some point of differentiation. Heflamoke also says, consolidation for 100 Thieves isn't bad. Some of these content creators are heavily overpaid and in a region they don't need to be. To tweet, you don't need a U.S. citizen. This is true. As someone who has just left the U.S.
Nobody tell this to YouTube Gaming.
Yeah, someone tell this to YouTube Gaming. It's true. It's both great points, Heflamoke. Totally agree. Guys, I want to bring up the third. Sorry for making this segment so long, but we don't have that many articles this week. This one is a bit sillier, okay? And I just wanted to bring up, you have FaZe going public, you have 100 Thieves with these sort of strategic moves, if you want to call it that, and then Guild Esports also in the news this week with a story that's way less interesting. Guild Esports appoint safeguarding and well-being lead. Throughout the esports industry, there's a real need for organizations to show duty of care to the people they work with. Basically, someone to make sure the players are okay. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. They want to create a safer esports ecosystem for like the players and their parents and things like that. The pro players, I mean. In the context of the hardship around esports orgs and everything going on here, does anyone think this is like right on point? Is it tone deaf? Is it cost that esports orgs probably shouldn't be saddled with? I mean, I'll read Chris's comment here and see if you guys agree with it. He says, VP of feels good use of dollars. I mean, Chris, that was my take, but I'm curious how you guys feel about this.
Yeah, look, I'm the biggest softie of the group here, and even I am like, let's work on like making money first. If they were wildly successful and had hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and all that, of course, this is something that I like to see, but they don't have that. So I don't think that this is useful, and I don't really get it.
Lindsay, I love that you said that, because if anyone was going to take that side, it was going to be you, right? I think
I'm a fan. I mean, I feel like there's other things that I've seen that are along the same lines that are like make way more sense. For example, making sure that you have good upper trajectory within the organization, making sure that your creators are well taken care of, encouraging good habits among your athletes so that they can perform better. Like, yes, all of those are very, very, very real things for a competitive esports team and for just running a good organization, right? I think it's great to have happy employees, but this whole we want to make everyone feel like first of all, there's no direction to this. It doesn't generate money. Guild Esports isn't doing well. This just feels like a throwaway. I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah. Heflamoke says, this is empty PR. We're doing this for 20 years, and as the industry grew, we do it quite sophisticatedly. It's called a team manager plus support staff, if it's a bigger org. True, right? That should be just one responsibility line on the team manager side, right? I don't know if you need a whole VP position for this. Seems wasteful. JM says, that was hilarious, Chris. Do you think this would be a good move for larger organizations? I'm curious what Chris thinks, but what do you guys think? Do you think this would be a good move for, should FaZe have made this hire? Would that have been better
already? Because it's good publicity. Look, culture is important. Culture and relationships are even more important when you're part of a competitive team. So I do think there's some merit to it. Obviously, we don't know what this person's getting paid, what their responsibilities are, what their other responsibilities are, right? To the point that was just made. They could also be the team manager, and then they kind of moonlight as this, therapist or whatever as well. But I definitely think, I think Lindsay's answer was probably nuanced enough in terms of understanding that these things are important, but also maybe there are other building blocks that are also important that need to be built first.
Yeah. Heflamoke says, it's for non-athletes, then it's called HR, which is also normal to have for anything more than 15 plus staff. Very, very true. Very true. JM says something like TSM. TSM has their own issues in that department. Story we're not going to get into, but they did get a bit of a slap on the wrist from Riot. Matt says, damn, Chris is always spot on. Chris is always spot on. You guys are, all of you, on fire with the comments today. All right, guys, before we move on, just a quick word. This live stream, this weekly news show, very generously sponsored by YouGov. YouGov produces the absolute best data on gamers, games, esports fans all around the world. Best of all, it's living data. It's data that's constantly being updated. So if you're looking to reach this gaming audience, if you are looking to do business in or around the gaming space, you absolutely need to be talking to the folks at YouGov. It's incredibly actionable data. You will make better decisions if you talk to YouGov. It's just a fact. And if you want, there's a bunch of free insights, free data. I will put the link that we've published with YouGov at yougov.com/BOE. I'll put it in all the chats, yougov.com/BOE. Definitely go check that out. Show YouGov some love. And if you want to reach out to them, or if you want to be connected to them, please feel free. Ask me, ask Jimmy, Lindsay, Jeff. Any of us can connect you with the folks at YouGov. We really appreciate their support. So go check it out. yougov.com/BOE. Heflamoke, by the way, says the irony of Riot wrist slapping TSM. Yeah, it's heavy with irony, which why we're not going to go down this rabbit hole. A rabbit hole I do want to go down is the doc. You guys know how much I love the doc. And Dr. Disrespect News. Lindsay, your reaction to the doc is Jeff's reaction to the chair reviews. Don't worry, we have a chair review for you guys, so both of you can give me an eye roll this episode.
Today with the FaZe Clan there too.
And the doc in the news, the headline here, Dr. Disrespect eyeing 2-year break from YouTube to work on Midnight Society games. So the two-time is tempted to go all in on his new studio. This actually happened live on his stream. He was streaming, and he opened the broadcast. He was on PUBG. It says he found himself with nothing to play. Then he got on Call of Duty. He was complaining about Call of Duty, how it's horrible. And then he says, I was sitting in my command center thinking, what am I going to play? That's what the gaming industry is for me right now. I'm in one of those spells. So he's thinking of taking a break until early 2024 to focus on his game. I'll just say I gotta love this conviction if it's true. But what do you guys think of, the doc giving up a very lucrative streaming career to go focus on making his game? And is there any conclusions to be drawn about the state of game development, like that he sees that as maybe a bigger opportunity? Like what do you guys make of this? What conclusions do you draw from this? Jeff, you have thoughts?
Well, I guess first, to cover his broader point, I mean, I think Matthew kind of summed it up. He's not wrong that the gaming industry is in a little bit of a spell where there's not many big games that have come out. So that's correct. I mean, we're seeing that in the data, the numbers, some of the revenue numbers, and just big game launches are down this year. I think it's really a product of the console cycle and then also the hangover from COVID. I mean, games that were already being made before COVID kind of came out, and things that started up during COVID have just taken longer because there was work from home. People were distracted just in general. I think that's true. To get specific to the doc, I don't believe him. And I think if he does do this, it would be incredibly dumb because the really only selling point that this game has is him. So if he stops streaming for 3 years and builds a mediocre video game and then comes out 3 years from now and is like, hey guys, remember me? I'm the guy that used to be a famous YouTuber. Come buy my video game. It's like he's killing his golden goose, which is him and his personality and his ability to market. Like that's the whole value proposition his studio has, is that he can market the game because he has his following. So why would he get rid of that?
That is an interesting take. It's a great take.
Hot take for sure. Not to mention the existing sponsors that he's going to have to cancel for next year. I always like to liken these things to other forms of entertainment and see how they were done. And typically I go to music because that's my background. You see a lot of artists that say this is my last album ever and then I'm retiring, just to get hype on that album for that month or to get hype on the next album when they inevitably come out of retirement. Jay-Z, I think, was pretty famous for doing that with the Black Album, which was, some people think his best. This isn't a music show, so I won't get into it, but it's a common PR stunt and move to get attention. And it works in music, but that's because in music, you need that downtime anyways to create, to think, to decompress. Streaming is altogether different because it requires day-to-day content. It requires day-to-day fan engagement. That's one of the things I think that advertisers and sponsors love about being in this space, is that they get that tangible relationship with the audience in real time. And that's something that the doc offers with that brand loyalty that he's developed and created. So it's a very risky thing for him to just walk away from that temporarily, because this is such a competitive space. There's no guarantee when you come back that people are still going to want to watch you and that they haven't moved on as someone that they resonate more with. Who I think there were some former TSM gamers, wasn't it like Daquan and a few others that had done that not too long ago. I haven't seen the stats on their numbers on if that was successful or not for them. But to Jeff's point, you have something that's risky already, that's compounded now by an additional marketing vehicle and business that you've created completely based off of your ability to influence that same audience to what you say and ask them to do on a day-to-day basis. So I don't know if this is just a PR stunt and a short thing for 3 to 6 months, but at the end of the day, he's not wrong. I mean, there's not a lot of great things to play right now. So that thing is the one thing that I do agree with. I just don't know if this is your career and your brand, if this is the right move for you. So we'll see how it goes.
I mean, you got to love the storyline that Doc saves the gaming industry. That's just like, that is a cool storyline should it come to pass. What's interesting is history has sort of proven that streaming audiences don't transfer platform to platform, right? They drop off when you move platform to platform. What I don't think is conclusive, historically at least, is do audiences transfer over time? In other words, meaning like, because the doc was banned, if you remember, I don't even remember how long he was away from his stream. It was 6 months, something like that, maybe longer. It might have been longer, but it was months at least. And I think his biggest stream ever was his comeback stream, right? Like, was the stream that his first stream back. The question is, if you disappear for a year or two, does your entire audience come back after a year or two?
It's too long. If it was,
That's too long. Yeah.
I think you're right. If it was like he did this 3 months, if it was like, all right, last quarter we're pushing to launch, like I'm heads down, like he could do it. But 3 years, 2 years, like that.
Way too
Who's
long.
going to remember Doc 3 years from now if he's not streaming?
I mean, this could be just a big stunt. Like Doc's coming back to play the only game worth playing, his, right? And that's kind of, so maybe it's a temporary hiatus just until he launches his game. I'm not sure.
Matt says it feels like the gaming industry is in one of those spells, not just the doc. This, I mean, look, guys, I called this. I'm like real Oracle kind of stuff. I said this is where things were leading. Matt says I couldn't agree with Jeff more. If the game isn't a success, he can always use the "I was distracted with streaming" excuse. This would actually put more pressure on him in Midnight Society, I think. I mean, assuming people remember him when he comes back, right? I think the crux of Jeff's point is no one will care when he comes back. Progent says, I think everyone's in that spell right now. I agree with Jeff. Him leaving can help and hurt the game, depending on how the game is delivered. There's a lot of promises this game is trying to deliver. Do you guys really think that if he puts a tweet out a year and a half from now, a lot of people aren't going to notice, right? Like if you don't think he will still have some of the power of his audience?
Well, but it's a question of how much too, because of course he'll have some of the power, but how much?
But meaning,
it's also
here's
like
the point.
Paul, you
Let me
also have to
make the
remember, what if he can keep? You have to compare it to what the alternative is, right? Like if he kept building his stream and then put out a tweet, "Hey, I'm about to play my new game. Come join my stream." He's going to get 1 million people. Will he get more than that if he stops streaming for a year?
Okay, let me just make the counterpoint, right? If he stops streaming for a year and his audience gets cut by half, let's say, or even more, by 80%, okay? When he comes back, he still has 20% of his audience, right? If the game is good, that 20% is the only priming of the pump you need, right? If the game's really good, that 20% is enough to sort of set off a chain reaction, I think, of virality to make the game a success. If the game is no good, right, it doesn't matter if he has 20% of his audience or 100% of his audience, it won't make the game a success.
Yeah, but it would still give it a better chance if there's more. Number one, number two, he's giving up like $20 million in the meantime. Why would he want it? Like, what's the benefit of having less people on the street, so less potential reach, and giving up money? Like, unless
he has to believe that the game
time, like unless he's maybe actually very hands on, is like, look, I literally just don't have time to stream because I'm building the game. Then I guess I could see the argument.
Yeah. Heffelmoke says Dr. Disrespect is like Amaranth without a hot tub. He's business savvy. He can't quit streaming. I mean, you guys are on fire today with the comments. Amaranth without a hot tub. His game is a crap shot. Budget too low. Choice of partner strange. This is just bait memeing. I mean, look, I have high hopes for his game, guys. Like he has, decent people in the room. And I like his choice of genre, right? I like where he's decided to go with the game. But all of you seem to agree that this is just him, like, this is just clever marketing from the doc, basically, is what I'm hearing from everybody. Adam says, I'm late. Adam, doesn't matter. We're just happy you're here. Welcome. Alan says, he's giving 6-week updates if you pre-order, right? That's a way to hear from the doc. I don't know. Now that we know that the game is at least a couple years off, maybe pre-ordering isn't the best bet, because that's still a long time and a lot can change.
And who wants 6 weeks updates for 2 years?
Yeah.
We build to like one additional level. Okay, cool. We're kind of over this.
Yeah. Heflemoke says, it's not a question. We have tangible return numbers for influencers as well as numbers of game/platform swaps. There's a significant loss of audience. A year is an eternity. Again, I'm not debating, right? It's a fair point. No question he will lose audience. The question is, does the time off allow him to build a better game? And is the better game the greater success factor than the size of his audience, right? That's the trade-off in my mind. Those are the levers. Heflemok says, a game doesn't publish with launch. It's a constant alpha, beta, launch, teasing, patching, marketing, etc. It's a full life cycle, full-time and hands-on job. This is also true. But the doc knows this, right? He used to work for Activision. So, he's familiar, I think, with the ins and outs of that industry. Progent says, honestly, now that I think about it, I followed a YouTuber way back named Frankie on PC. He randomly just stopped uploading for six-ish years ago with about 2 million views on that last video. He came back about 6 months ago with the same views. So who knows, it could still work. Wow. I mean, I would think, you guys not think that's probably an outlier, right? That's probably not the...
It's just I know a way different platform. Like building up a YouTube audience in that way is completely different than building up a live streaming audience.
Yeah. It's a good point. Like if we stopped streaming even for a few weeks, I think we would lose significant numbers. Mm-hmm. It's just the reality. People expect content. All right, guys, let's move on. We talked about the doc enough. I want to stay on this content theme though. Let's talk about Nintendo. Nintendo in the news finally maybe doing something on the content side we all are going to agree on. And this one is Nintendo buys animation studio, forms Nintendo Pictures. So it says the subheadline, Nintendo's cinematic universe could go way beyond Chris Pratt's Mario. So they're buying Dynamo Pictures. It's a visual production company based in Tokyo, focusing on CG animation and motion capture. They worked on several TV projects like Yuri on Ice and games like Nier Replicant and Death Stranding. The studio has worked on Pikmin short movie series. So they've done some work with Nintendo. And the goal here, it says, according to the filing, the acquisition is intended to, quote, strengthen the planning and production structure of visual content in the Nintendo group and focus on developing visual content utilizing Nintendo IP. So, we've I think been critical of Nintendo for not doing more, movies, TV shows, etc. with their IP. Do we think this is a big enough move for them, guys? Like, is this? I had not heard of Dynamo Pictures. Maybe that's just because I'm not, that aware of the Tokyo, animation scene. But is this a Nintendo scale move? And do you feel like there's enough conviction from Nintendo that we may start seeing real TV and movies here? Lindsay, maybe start with you.
Just like this, I don't know. I guess I feel pretty pessimistic about this just because it feels not about it actually happening, but I don't know. It's just like, it's so late. Like I'm glad that it finally happened, but at this point, like any excitement that I felt about Nintendo produced content has just waned considerably. That being said, I think this is the way to get a lot. Like, I hope they do a lot of stuff for kids. I totally think this is a great way to get younger generations back into playing the games and stuff. I'm super not excited about the Chris Pratt movie. I just don't think it's going to be great, but whatever, at least they're trying it and doing it. So I guess on the whole, I think this is a good move. I think it's a good strategy. I think it's Nintendo, so it won't be crazy. It's not going to lose them tons of money. They're not going to go all in and run out and bankrupt themselves in a year because it's Nintendo and they're very careful. I'm glad that it's finally happening, but my excitement level is below the floor.
Wow.
First
and
of all,
that's Nintendo fangirl.
I don't know if they're that late. I mean, I feel like we've been talking about it for a while, but I don't think for the longest time, people were very the whole industry was very bearish on kind of crossover IP between, we saw a lot of really high profile failures over the last 20 years. And then I feel like around the time of The Witcher coming out on Netflix was when the light bulb sort of went off and people were like, oh, okay. Maybe this whole video game transmedia concept does work. And so we've seen a lot of announcements since then, but it's not.
I don't know.
hasn't been
Nintendo's
that
been
long.
around since the 1800s, so I just would have expected a little bit more in media strategy.
Well, I agree. I mean, you're not wrong, but I think you're maybe being a little hard on. We should be happy that they're changing. Versus,
I am. I'm just not excited.
Do you guys think that this may just be very Japan focused, and we may not see any of this stuff in the U.S. market, for example, or North American market?
Hope not.
It's pretty interesting.
Jimmy?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely a need for region specific content. So I hadn't thought about that. I was thinking more along the lines of like major motion pictures. And I also wanted to say, Lindsay, that Chris Pratt is a national treasure. So you take that back. No, I don't know how to feel about that movie either. That I don't know about that either. But I do like his acting. But yeah, I don't think they're gonna put him in like a Japanese TV series and have it dubbed over or anything. So I don't know what they're going to do with this studio. All I know is whenever we see announcements out of Nintendo, it's always, to me at least, late or smaller or not as innovative as I would have expected or hoped for. I don't always see a lot of support for their fans or their community the way you see a lot of other companies that are taking big swings, other than maybe the theme park, which still isn't open yet, right? So I'm just happy that they're expanding and that they're finding, to just point, another way to connect with their audience and another media, because they don't have to have like every show come out and be successful. They just need that one, hit TV series that justifies the entire move, and then continues to fuel the need for innovation and additional products. So yeah, but making it region specific is, I don't know how I would feel about that. I think that there's too large of a global community, that if they did something like that, Paul, it would probably be created in such a way, like The Office, for example, where they have just 20 different products of the same series or same show for each of their communities and regions. Hopefully they would intelligently design it in that way, where it's not just limited to one region and one language in one product. And I imagine that would be, with the right foresight and pre-production, that would be feasible.
Yeah, it's unclear if this acquisition is big enough to even create a major motion picture, right? Like it may just be for a TV, like to make TV shows for Japan. That I had not heard of this production company at all. I hadn't really heard of the projects they had done, so it felt a little small potatoes to me. JM, though, is excited for it. Says, yes, Nintendo, I'm here for it. I mean, JM, you and a lot of people, all I need is, he says, is a Star Fox animated series / movie. Like I said, there's demand for it, right? Nintendo should know this. There's a rabid fan base for Nintendo content. Project says, I would see more along the lines of movies rather than shows for this studio. I think it's a good addition, but nothing that really grabs my attention. Yeah, Projects, I think we all sort of agree with that, right? Like, it's not even a story that got much coverage, to be honest. Like, you would think Nintendo really, if they doubled down on content in a big way, would have been a much bigger story. All right, guys, let's move on. We have two quick stories I want to end with. This one, guys, is more just so I can say, look, I can't wait for this future. You guys all made fun of me when I said we were going to escape to our garages to play video games in our cars. Elon Musk, in agreement with me, says we should see Steam running on Tesla soon. I mean, I'm kind of joking, but like, this is kind of major, right? Steam opens up a massive library of games to be played in your car. Does this mean Tesla's become maybe the ultimate portable gaming device?
I mean, it's cool.
I mean, it's the definition of mobile hardware.
Elon Musk with a grain of salt. I think he's always, multiple years late on these promises, but he does generally come through with them. So I do believe that we probably will see this happen, but probably in 3 to 5 years. And Steam is also not known for their speed of execution and following through on things either. So, yeah, I mean, I think it'll be cool. I'd be more interested if it would be cooler if this was like him and Gabe Newell like on a stage somewhere actually presenting a product versus, I don't even know if Elon had cleared this with Steam or if he's just saying, oh, we're going to make it possible, so would like more information. But yeah, I think it's cool. Cool story.
Well, on July 16th, he tweeted, demo probably next month. So,
well, that's great.
There you go. Jimmy, Lindsay, any other thoughts on this? Chris says, Elon solves the housing crisis. I mean, he's going to solve a lot of crises. Matt says, it is mobile hardware, but a Switch Steam Deck costs significantly less than a car. It's an excellent point, Matt, and also very true.
Well, I could probably write off my Tesla, though. I don't know if I could write off a Steam Deck with the IRS, so that's the difference. Definitely the ultimate mobile hardware, though I would get so dizzy as a passenger if I were gaming while someone else were driving. So I don't know. Honestly, from a tech standpoint, it would be interesting to see what kind of data they can collect from their users and drivers that are going to be using features like this, when, where, and you know, because Tesla's a lot more than just a vehicle, right? And Steam as a gaming platform, as a social media platform, as a gaming news platform, and all these different things that you can really get from it. You know, I just love that Elon's such a gamer and that he's, you know, taking his passions and just forcing it where it doesn't even make sense, but just like, no, you're all gonna have this available to you, and 1% of Tesla drivers will take advantage of it.
You'll see the wellness VP will be prescribing stints of gaming in your garage to get away from the family, you know. JM says, I still wouldn't be able to get through my Steam library. This is true. The 200 indie games that you downloaded because it was part of some sale at some point, you probably still wouldn't make it through all of them, even if you could play it in your Tesla. All right, guys, one last thing. And then let me just read this comment, and then I'll move on to the one last. Project says, I'd be playing Apex in the parking lot while the girlfriend grabs groceries. I mean, the use cases are just so numerous. I mean, I've been saying this over and over again. Lindsay has doubted me every step of the way. Elon and I on the same page. All right, guys. I did a doc story. So to be fair, in the ongoing feud between Lindsay and Jeff, I have to do a gaming chair story, and so. As most of you know, we are the world's foremost gaming chair reviewers on this channel, in addition to being gaming business experts. But here we have D-Box throwing their hat in the ring. So the headline here is company files patent for motion simulating gaming chair. So it says the haptic technology and gaming peripheral company D-Box files a patent for a new gaming chair with a built-in actuator for motion simulation. Obviously, it's all about deeper immersion, which they talk about. I wanted to connect this, guys, to what we talked about last week. And by the way, you can see how this, like, there's this motor connected at the bottom. Remember my talking about butt kickers and the Razer acquisition, which we discussed, Razer buying a haptics company to integrate in their chairs. Does no one see a trend here now with D-Box announcing, you know, a chair with haptics built in? Do we think this is a fad, or do we think that the next sort of generation, if you want to call it, gaming chairs will be more immersive in this way, and not just like bucket seats pulled out of a car and painted in red and black?
I mean, I don't know what it takes to get it to stick, because I remember like all those years ago when 4D movies were all the rage, and it was kind of the same thing, and it was very based on haptics. So I can obviously see a world where this takes off, but I think maybe it's not the next generation. I think it's 2 or 3 down still. But I do think that this will eventually be the thing that people get used to.
Well, I'm curious, guys, truly, is it fad, or is this a technology, haptics built into chairs? Do we, like, 5 years from now, we're just all going to have one?
I think price is going to be a big indicator of that, you know, because a lot of people, obviously there's a market for $150 to $300 gaming chairs, but a lot of people still are going to use their family's, you know, chair at their family computer. And now you're talking about something that's going to be significantly more expensive just for some type of novelty, when it's supported only on the games that, you know, that offer that. So, and then on top of whether or not a game supports it, then it has to feel real, right? It can't just be my chair vibrating, or else, like, what's the point of that? So I think there's a lot to be answered. You guys know I'm not a big fan of this, because I just want I'd be happy with a built-in massager and a heater in my chair. And apparently that's asking a lot, because I still don't have that one, but I don't necessarily need all the rumbling or all the bells and whistles. I think there's definitely going to be a small market for it. It sounds fun. This chair is probably going to be really heavy, though. It's probably going to be pretty expensive. And again, the first versions, I just don't know how well they're going to work, how realistic they're going to feel. So too many questions left for me. But whether or not it's a fad, I think there's a niche in gaming culture for things of this nature. So I would imagine if they can get the price to a tolerable point, and if they can make it feel like I don't know, in a car that's driving or whatever else that it's intended to be experienced to a slightly believable way, that'll have some success.
Project says, I could see this being very useful in VR and the metaverse, as well as the mind immediately goes to sim setups. Look, for proper sim setups, a butt kicker is like almost a necessity. Like that haptic feedback in a good sim setup really is, I don't know if any good sim setup that doesn't have that. Chris says, fad. Everyone watching this has turned off the rumble feature on their controller. I just think the rumble feature on the controller, well, it's a good analogy. I think that's a fair analogy, to be honest, now that I think about it. But I for some reason, I don't have a good argument why. I think it's more likely to succeed in chairs. I think maybe the range of things you can simulate is higher if you have good haptics. Adam says, I think it'll be like scuff controllers. There will be a market, but not every gamer will have one. You know, if the price comes out, like every cell phone today has a haptics, like I mentioned this on last week's, I think, live stream, like has a haptic motor in it. And it was originally only like iPhones and things that had it so that they could do, you know, touch that was believable, that felt like a button. So I think it could catch on when you have big players like Razer putting dollars behind it. It'll be interesting to see if other manufacturers come out with similar products. Guys, that gets us to the end of this week's live stream / weekly news show / post podcast live stream. I just want to thank everybody that came, participated. This was such a great stream. Adam and Chris and Progence and JM and Matt and Heflamoke and Alan and, you know, all you guys, some new faces here, which is always fun to see. Really appreciate you guys coming in, participating. Jimmy, Lindsay, Jeff, thank you guys as always. Don't forget, guys, tune into the podcast this week. It's a great episode. Make sure to follow Business of Esports everywhere, on Instagram, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on TikTok. Literally, we're on every single platform. We put content on every single platform that's different. It's not just podcast and the news show. Also, if you don't already, sign up for the newsletter and go visit thebusinessofesports.com. We put literally dozens of written articles up every single day, and the newsletter also comes out daily. So there's just so much more content than what you guys find just in these videos and these podcasts. So thank you to everyone. Don't forget, guys, the most important thing, the future is fun. We'll see you guys next week.